Welcome back to another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith and joined by my co-host Dan McVaugh.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 5G Guys. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, go to 5gguys.com, subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We'll give you hits when we have a new episode that drops. And we also have a newsletter that comes out every Friday, gives you the top 3 or 4 really interesting tech stories in your inbox. So if you haven't signed up yet, go check that out. Today we have a guest. His name is Hugh Odom. Hugh is with Vertical Consultants. Prior to that firm, he was an AT&T attorney for 11 years. And then after that, he started Vertical Consultants. And they provide consulting services and advice for companies like Walmart, Disney, government institutions to include the United States Postal Service, New York Housing Authority. They've worked for the city of Atlanta, city of Charlotte. And so it's great to have you on, Hugh, because, throughout my 30-year career in wireless, there's been a constant, I'd say, friction between carriers and industries that are trying to build infrastructure and the communities in which they're trying to build that infrastructure. And I don't think it's a necessary friction. And it's great to have you as a guest because I think we'll get a chance to talk about how you're able to address that in your practice. So thanks for joining us. Welcome aboard.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity to be part of your podcast. Very much appreciate it.
Well, perfect. Hugh, tell us about your firm and how you guys help your clients.
Well, we've been in business through our 14th year. And as mentioned just a second ago, we work with all types of property owners, all types of clientele across the country, from individual property owners up to some of the biggest corporate entities out there. And the commonality is what we're trying to do is kind of do a couple of things. We're trying to work on behalf of our client who's been approached or has a situation by which there's an infrastructure build out, cell towers, rooftops, et cetera, that they've been approached for. They have something existing and there's modifications needed on those sites. We're trying to work with them to better their situation, of course, but also in the same light, we're trying to explain to them what a carrier or a cell tower company is looking for as well, because it's as much as telling them what we are trying to look out for them and how we want to enhance their situation. But we're all trying to explain some of the necessities and then also some of the wants from a wireless carrier or cell tower company. So our job is to educate on both sides and try to represent our client to the best of our abilities to get them the best situation now and going forward.
Well, that sounds awesome. I think maybe a good way to start, and we like to do this in a lot of our episodes, is kind of do a little bit of a history lesson for our listeners. Tell us a little bit, what's your take on how things used to be versus where they are today? What are the commonalities, and what sort of things have maybe changed in that sort of environment?
Well, I think the big thing I can see from years ago, I think when I was with AT&T, wireless was in its fledgling states. I came into AT&T and I was more on the hard side. And what I mean by the hard asset side, the real estate side, et cetera. And at that point, AT&T spun off New Singular, and there was a situation where they got separated out. And so it was a transition where the core business was the landlines, let's say, the hard business, and then went to the wireless business, and they came back to AT&T. And that's how I really got involved with the wireless side when that kind of consolidation happened, and I started doing more and more wireless deals. And what we seen back then was there was a little more of I'll say a wild, wild west kind of situation. There was just everything going on so fast, so kind of helter skelter, at least in my opinion. There wasn't a lot of structure, and that's what we tried to do to try to get structure from finding sites to use to being able to get zoning and permitting, trying to get things set up for not only today, but as I mentioned, going forward as well. And it was really trying to figure out a pathway. And inside AT&T was how I handled that was trying to find out, putting together agreements and putting together strategies to actually get something from point A, B, C, D, and E. And it was a lot less on both the telecom side, at least in my opinion, but also on the municipal side, because they were just getting into it. This was a new thing for them. A lot of the larger municipalities had some structure, but when you got outside that larger municipality, the smaller towns and city, this was just, they were trying to figure it out. And there was a lot of inconsistency.
Yeah, I can remember in the mid '90s when there was massive cellular buildouts going on. That, to your point, a lot of municipalities, they had no policy for dealing with these applications on a zoning or building permit side. And I remember numerous jurisdictions just doing flat out moratoriums, saying, "Hey, we're overwhelmed. We don't know what to do with this." And now I think it's pretty clear that pretty much every jurisdiction has some sort of policy and procedure for dealing with these types of applications. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think it's gotten to the point where they've caught up to some degree. I think as we probably will talk about this in this podcast, there's still ever changing situations, and the problem is this isn't their forte, and they're always having to catch up from behind. So they've kind of caught up with I'll call it the basics, and then maybe the next level. But as we know in this business, it's technology and it's always changing, and your situations are always changing. So in the municipality side of it, from the corporate side of it, from the private property owner side of it, they're always going to be lagging behind. And that's really where you get this disconcerting issue between the necessities of a wireless carrier or tower company and their speed to market situation, let's say, versus a municipality, a private property owner, a corporate owner of properties in multiple jurisdictions, trying to figure out, well, hold on, what is this actually doing? And you're trying to connect those. And always the carrier is going to be on the front end of that, and the property owner is going to be on the backside of that, trying to catch up.
Yeah, has economics changed? In that time period. Back in the day, it was a good way to do it. Landowners knew they were going to get this golden paycheck for a long period of time. With 5G networks and the less, capital spent, is that model changed in property owners? Is it less, or do you know?
No, that's what we deal with every day. That's our primary business.
Okay.
If we're negotiating deals out for the property owners, and that's where we go to head with every carrier and every cell tower company every day for about 14 years. And we have a different mentality, and this is where we may have a little bit of disagreement with regards to the pricing models and structure, more particularly structure. I will say that from a financial standpoint, my particular and our company's focus on this and our outlook on this and kind of viewpoint is that the carriers and the tower companies have been using the same playbook for years, and we believe that's the wrong playbook, and it's advantageous for us. I'm brutally honest with people. Is that the reason we know they're going to go left, they're going to right, they're trying to play out the same way because they've been successful at it, and really our company was formed trying to, let's just say, reroute the course of the stream with regards to property owners. We're trying to protect our property owners. We're trying to educate our property owners, but we're also trying to enhance them from a financial situation, which I believe over the last 20, 30 years has been skewed very much toward the carriers and toward the cell tower companies.
I know that historically, having been on that side of the world for the bulk of my career, we were doing 20-year leases. Very one-sided usually, right? The carrier has more rights to terminate than the landlord does typically. What are some of the big changes from that typical playbook that you're finding are successful in the marketplace now that are really meeting in the middle in terms of still getting the carriers what they need and want, but being more, I don't know, for lack of a better term, friendly or cohesive with what your clients and the landlords are seeking?
Well, I think it breaks down two different situations. First, on a new tower build or new site build, what we're looking at is a way to get the carrier or tower company into the site. But with regards to that, from a financial standpoint, we look at these, again differently. How the industry, at least in my opinion, has presented these to property owners as a real estate transaction, because that's the easiest transaction to do. You sit to a property owner, you talk to them about a rent, they get focused on the rent. Talk to them about an escalator, focus on the escalator. Talk to them about a term. If the tower company or wireless carrier can get you a rent, a term, and an escalator, they fix their costs over 20, 30, 40 years, no matter how valuable the site has become. We believe in a different model. The reason being is I was inside AT&T for all those years, and I know that it's a utility model. I don't look at every site in an area and say, because it's in this zip code, they all have the same value to me, just because they're in the same marketplace. That's not how it's done. At least how we believe it should be done is everything is looked individually. From a existing site basis, we look at the situation based upon two basic principles. If there's a modification, extension, something of that nature for renegotiation, because a lot of those older leases have come up or they're getting kind of come up, those 20, 30 years are running out. And we're trying to restructure those to make sure we're valuing those based upon utility now, based upon the value being derived, and also the detriment to the wireless carrier or the tower company if they had to relocate it from an operational and economic standpoint. And we're trying to restructure it from a situation to get them back up to where they need to be, that being the property owner. But put that structure in place to make sure that they're getting fair value going forward. I always look at this again as both sides can benefit but it has historically been, again, skewed toward the carrier and the tower company, by which they're fixed their costs and they keep on getting more and more value out of a site. And as you mentioned, the substantial difference between a property owner and a cell tower or wireless carrier tenant is they have a lot of flexibility. They have a very liberal right to terminate the agreement, whereas a property owner is locked in. And that is a huge issue, not only with regards to that commitment to the tenant, but also with regards to how that impacts the property with regards to future development, disposition, financing even. And that's what we try to look for our property owners, to try to give them a little more flexibility.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting model. And so, we talked a little bit about the carriers. So how does the Crown Castles and the American Towers differ from the carriers, or do they, or is it all the same?
No, they're two totally different business models when you're looking at lease agreements. So you guys know that years ago, about, I think it's 2016, 15 and 16, American Tower and Crown Castle bought a significant amount of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile towers, and because those carriers wanted to get out of the tower business. Well, the huge difference between the two entities, or the types of entities, from a carrier versus a traditional cell tower company, is a carrier judges value on a site, a tower site, let's say, based upon the value they're deriving for their customers, how necessary it is for that area, that network. Whereas an American Tower, a Crown Castle, and SBA Communication, the three largest tower companies, they look at it, they're a REIT, they're a real estate company. They're judging based upon revenues being generated from the carriers by putting their equipment on there. So when you're going to renegotiate one of those deals, it's really, you have to explain to a property owner the difference between having a lease with AT&T and having a lease with American Tower, and how the valuation is judged, and how each tenant makes money. And that's what we try to get people to understand. Not every dollar is coming through the same door with regards to a cell tower you see when you're driving down the road. And that's really important for our clients to understand, not only now, but going forward, and how to, I guess, take advantage and capitalize upon that now and in the years to come.
It's funny you talk about that difference between the tower companies and the carriers. And, that's been a somewhat friction-based relationship in my experience over the years as well, in terms of the tower companies' priority versus the carriers. And what's been interesting to see is last year, I believe it was, Verizon and Vertical Bridge did a joint venture. Vertical Bridge is the largest privately held REIT in the country, right? They're the fourth largest, I think, as a whole,
Yes.
below SBA, Crown, and ATC. And they did a joint venture. So now they're kind of in bed together, if you will, developing towers together through this joint venture. And so I'm really anxious, or not anxious, but curious to see how that may or may not differ in terms of the traditional business model between the carriers and the tower companies. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I mean, you're seeing different companies like that with regards to, especially Vertical Bridge, which is very aggressive. They have some extremely smart people over there. We disagree with a lot of what they do, but they're really smart people. And I always tell people I can disagree with somebody, but I understand their thinking, and I understand that there's a smart approach. We just disagree with it. So yes, you're right. Vertical Bridge has got a plan with Verizon and others, and they are looking to try to capture as much market share as they can with regards to new builds, et cetera. Same thing, a little different situation, I'll bring it up, with regards to Tillman and AT&T and Verizon. They have a totally different business model with perspective. They're going out. So these companies, more particularly the tower companies, are trying to find, especially the smaller ones, until, as you mentioned, Vertical Bridge is not small by any means, but they're the fourth largest. They're trying to find an avenue to get those captive carriers in a way that they can build most sites and capture that site initially. And as you guys know, once you get a site up, that's the first step. Then it's adding revenue from that point on. That's where the gravy comes in for regards to how you make money off these sites. So they've been very aggressive. They're very smart. Again, we disagree with a lot of things, how they approach things, but they've taken a different line than an American Tower, SBA, or a Crown Castle. And if you talk to those companies, which I do regularly, those three big companies, they would tell you that, again, that is a different path, and they have to go about it a different way because of how they're structured.
Yeah. And if we take this same conversation and spin it a little bit, there's a big change that happened over the last 10 years or so. that listeners may want to learn about, and that is the use of public right-of-way to put this infrastructure into, right? And the use of what's called a small cell. So it's a much smaller, more compact version of a tower, if you will. It's on a light pole. It's short. The equipment itself is in a smaller package, and with that's sort of changed the dynamics a bit, right? Because now the landlord is a public utility that has the right to that public right of way. And there's some federal laws that govern that now that there hasn't been traditionally before that started happening, right? Can you sort of explain that dynamic for our customers and give us your 2 cents or $1.50 or however much you'd like to in terms of what's different about what we've just been describing to the audience now with that sort of deployment scenario?
Well, I think with regards to that, as you mentioned, it's a situation by which they're taking advantage of public right of way. And as you mentioned, the federal government is controlling that. And a lot of that is based upon a couple different things. One being they're trying to right now, especially push 5G as fast as they can. That's where that's mostly being implemented. And there's such things as you guys know, a shot clock situation that the municipalities have been pushing back on tremendously over the last few years. And there's some pros and cons to that. The pros for the carriers is that they're trying to get that speed to market. And if they have different municipalities using different methods by how long they take to review a application, let's say, then that slows everything down. So what the federal government, and here recently in a recent ruling by one of the federal courts, is they're saying, look, there's a 60 day, I believe, 60-day shot clock. And the interesting thing about that is the shot clock doesn't start when the application starts. It starts when there's initial discussions. And that starts it a lot earlier. And that the reason they do that is that how the municipalities found a way around this is they just had a really long application process. And you couldn't get the application figured out until a long period of time. And then your 60 days started. So there's a back and forth between municipalities. There's also a bunch of bulk approvals where they come in with 100 of these hypothetically, and they're trying to figure all that out. And so there's a lot of issues. Now, from a municipality side, look, again, we're more property owner oriented, and I would say there's a lot of issues based upon what we were talking about earlier. A lot of these municipalities aren't up to speed. And if you're an AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, and you come to them and say, look, I have all these sites I want to build out in your public right of way, they have an issue of reviewing that. Plus, and this is one thing we have to talk to municipalities and universities and things like that have a lot of sites on their properties, is that we have to say, look, this is not only the issue of kind of understanding what's going to be out there. You're going to get pushback from your citizens. You're going to get pushback of saying, why is this out in front of my house or in front of my store or whatever? Is this safe, et cetera? So I understand the reasoning for the carriers wanting to expedite this. I understand the government's reasoning for trying to get up to 5G. I think we're really losing the race globally with regards to 5G. That's another story. But I think the issue is you have so much pushback from the municipalities and more particularly the local citizens. They're thinking this is getting pushed through too fast.
A question that I'm sitting here thinking, as technology changes, we're in 5G, but we know that, private networks are coming, and that some municipalities are building their own infrastructure or taking advantage of the right of ways to put in their own. How do you think that, will that become a problem with the carriers as they try to expand, is when the municipalities actually need the same space?
Well, I have two viewpoints on it. First of all, I think municipalities trying to build their own network is sometimes like a carrier trying to run a municipality. It doesn't work. I mean, you can't. There's one thing to conceptually think it up. Next thing is to build it out, and the third thing is what they forget about is operating it. And it's a continual process. It's not just plug it in. Hey, we'll go away for 10 years and never have to do anything with it. It's always being processed. It's kind of like it's kind of like a boat. You're always having to fix something and deal with something and upgrade something to keep it up on the water. So I think that's number one. With regards to a conflict between the two, my thought is that eventually the municipalities will run into issues and those built out networks be transitioned into carrier networks. That's my thought on it. I think that's just where it's going to end up going. I think it's a good idea. Like a lot of good ideas, it sounds great. It may be implemented in a good way, but then operationally it becomes an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of areas where the municipalities, whether it's intentional because they've decided to try to deploy their own network, or because it's just reactive because they have a job function to process these applications. And by the way, back when large towers were the predominant applications by carriers, we were talking maybe tens per year in a certain municipality. That same municipality now with small cells in the right of way could be hundreds of years, so hundreds per year. So they aren't staffed up to deal with those applications. So even if they do have good processes and procedures, they don't have the full number of staff they even need to do that work. And now you introduce the same issue if now they're operating a network. It's just something that they haven't traditionally done. And so one area I've seen some interesting work done to sort of mitigate these issues is public-private partnerships, where private industry is providing a managed service to the municipality. I know there's some REITs out there that have contracts, for example, with the State Department of Transportation to manage their public right-of-ways for the applications that any party puts in to deploy infrastructure in that right-of-way, and help offload that local entity and provide a service to them for a fee. I could imagine the same thing may happen with some of these municipal networks as well, where, yeah, the municipality and the citizens still own the network, but they outsource the management, the operations of those networks. So I don't know if that'll be true or not, but that's one way I could see it happening.
Well, just my 2 cents worth on that. I think that's really a smart path to go. I really do. I think that solves a lot of issues with regards to the technology side of this, the rollout. And I look at one of the things I'm kind of my big thing is the digital divide and how we have such a have and have nots in the United States. And what's happening there is I think you do need that collaboration between the municipalities, especially the small municipalities and rural areas, with private enterprise to get this done. And that solves a lot of issues. Again, it's not only is it getting that technology out there, that service out there. It's a way for those municipalities to be educated on how all this works, because it's such, the thing we always say every day is this is such an industry we use every day. I mean, you use your cell phone every day, but the backbone of it, how this all works, there's just a few people that understand it, and there's so much misinformation about all the different types of technology out there, all the different types of infrastructure out there, and what it actually does and what it actually means.
Yeah, and I think we've used the term. I don't know if you've heard this term or used the same term, but really, wireless telecommunications and broadband are really the fourth utility at the end of the day. They may not be a regulated utility industry, but they're as essential as gas, water, and electric in a lot of cases now to the country, whether it's on the public side or the business side. Would you agree with that take?
Definitely. I mean, I think back in the 1920s, I believe, I think it was 27 or 28, there was a national electrification act that basically got electricity to everybody in the country, because there was parts of the country that didn't have electricity. I mean, that people think about that and they go, wow, I didn't know. And we're 100 years later, as you mentioned, we have a utility that isn't available to so many people. I mean, I'm not talking about tens of thousands, I'm talking about millions of people across the country. And not only is it not available, but sometimes when it is available, it's such a diminished capacity of the availability they have with regards to the speed of the network, et cetera. So yes, it is definitely the fourth utility. And besides, I use the phrase, besides air, water, and food, what do you rely upon most? Communication. And that communication these days is through a cell phone.
Do you think if I still worked for a carrier like I used to, I might lose my job for even considering this? But do you think that private cellular carriers should be a regulated utility?
That's a big question. I think that I think if you're looking at it from two different ways, if you're looking at it from the with regards to some type of control over that, then definitely yes, because you get willy nilly in some wild situations. With regards to availability, no. But there's a happy medium between the two. Regulation can be beneficial and it can be suffocating, but there's a happy medium with regards to regulation provides a path to get things done. It provides it provides a structure to get things done. If you can find that nice medium, then I think it works on both sides.
And that's kind of what the cable industry's done, right? Like in many cases, they're not a regulated utility, but they do have access to the right of way through franchise agreements, right?
Right. And they've taken advantage of that over the years, back decades ago, and that's been beneficial for them. Again, you have to look at this from different perspectives of the private enterprise, the public necessity, and then the ordinary person as well. I think that's the three layers of this that we kind of look at it from any kind of situation that we're presented.
Wow, it's a deep subject. I mean, it covers so many things, and I don't think most people understand how this is done and how it impacts the deployment of the technology. That sometimes the regulation and trying to get the leases done and the RTC is an impediment to getting the work executed and getting the work done. So,
well, you're exactly right. I think there's, what we're talking about, and this is an easy statement for me to say, it's more complex, but we're talking about, we talk every day about building bridges and roads and things of that nature. We're building infrastructure. That's what, that's what our little part of this company is in that piece of building that infrastructure out there. We work on one side of it predominantly, but that's what you're ultimately trying to do. And where I think it needs to happen, and I think it's a little bit, and we talked about this a little while ago. I mentioned the playbook. I think the playbook has to change. It's, the playbook has to change on all sides. And if you keep on running the things the same way, it's like a football game. If I keep on running the same play, eventually it doesn't get anywhere. I'm just stuck at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's what the big problem is. The wireless carriers, the cell tower companies, the municipalities, everybody kind of sits there and tries to run the same thing, and they need to figure out to be a little more nimble. And I think that's, as we started this conversation, you mentioned I was inside, worked for AT&T for a long time. And that's one of the things I understand there's restrictions, but you have to be able to think out of the box and figure out ways that don't exist right in front of you. You get so comfortable with doing it a certain way, eventually that catches up with you.
So that's a good segue as we wrap up our discussion today. Is disruptive and thinking outside of the box. What you want to play a little prognostication? Say the next 3 to 5 years, you see any technology disruptions coming that might change that playbook or might change the way these networks are deployed?
Well, I think the big thing, I think it's going to be interesting with regards to, this isn't a sexy topic, but I think that with regards to 5G, how capitalization, how they keep on pumping money into it, and more particularly how the return on investment that is. Because I think the carriers really are looking at that and how do you monetize that. That really is the issue. The AI portion of that, combination of 5G and AI, I always say 5G is the delivery system for AI, and I think that's really going to play into it. There's a lot of talk about the satellite portion of this, low orbit satellites. People kind of talk to us, and especially people who have cell towers or rooftop equipment. They say, is it going to eliminate cell towers? And I say, no, it is a supplement. It is not a substitute. And it's so far lagging behind in technology with regards to capacity. It can provide you some great services, but it is a supplement. But I think the great thing about this business, at least from our perspective, is that I can't say every day we wake up to something new, but every few months we wake up to something new, and then that we've been very lucky, but we worked very hard, and we've been able to capture an industry, a side of an industry that takes those situations, tries to help our clients capitalize on the situations, tries to work with them to educate them with regards to the carriers and the tower company what they need. And I don't see that changing anytime soon unless we come up with some technology that just replaces all this.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hugh. It's been really insightful. It's great to hear your perspective on it. I love the point counterpoint discussions that we have. Like you said, if we all got along and had the exact same perspective on things, we wouldn't get anywhere. So different perspectives are important, and I appreciate you being willing to have that conversation with us today.
Well, I can't save everybody, but at least I can preach the sermon and get as many on my side as possible. But thank you guys. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.